Well, sometimes we're writing about what we think is there's one story we haven't told that we think we should. When I finished my last book, which was A Writer's Life, I'd written about something of what we're talking about how a writer works and sometimes doesn't work. And before that book, I wrote, as I mentioned, Unto the Sons, which is about where I come from, describing my mother's store and all that we've discussed. And after these two books were published by Knopf, I have another book I owe them. I thought, what is my other story? Well, my story that I haven't written about, my story that I have not written about, and must also tell you, I am committed to nonfiction. I don't want to write a novel. That, to me, I'm not saying it's easy, but I have always believed that you can tell stories using real names, real situations, and make them stories, readable stories, dramatic, maybe, without being exaggerated, scenic, without using invention. I thought, what's my one story? Well, my one story, it seemed to me, is a 50-year history of a single relationship that takes place in one building, which is the building that I have lived in with my wife since we got married in 1959, or before that, 58. We were married in 59, but we lived there in 58. So it's 50 years as I speak to you now. And during that 50-year period, always in New York City, where the house is, we've had a history of two people, children being born, problems, as any relationship over a long period has many problems, reconciliations, different people entering and exiting in your lives, friendships, acquaintanceships, business partnerships. In my wife's case, always a writer. I mean, she's always been an editor, and I've always been a writer. And it's a story of living in a big city in a single house. I kept records. You know, I haven't said this on your show, but you would imagine I'm a person that keeps records because I'm a chronicler. And I also didn't say this, but I save letters. I save letters and I date them and I file them. And from since I met my wife, Nan, which was initially in 1957, I've always kept files, so every letter, every note, every hardware bill from by a hammer in 1950, I probably saved the receipt. And travel slips and all that material, which at least puts dates and triggers your mind if you look at stuff. I've saved it, and I'm having it. I've gone over it, So this 50 years, I have a record of every month of the 50 years. And now I'm finding storylines. What you do in the kind of work I do is first you gather material, you collect material. The next thing you have to do is organize it. And a lot of people collect material, but when it comes to what do you do with it? I mean, it's a whole warehouse of material. All this stuff is in storage. Then you have to get it out and do a kind of choreography. You have to kind of do a montage. You have to create something out of it. I mean, there are great sculptors who can get all the spare parts of lawnmowers and leftover parts from a truck and make it into a great sculpture. Well, as a writer, you can do the same, or we hope you can do the same, or hope I can do the same. But that was the idea of getting from this mass material and all these personalities that are interacting with the married couple, and the married couple from the time they were young and the time they were not so young and the time they thought this marriage is all over, and the history of the town and the nation going on during this 50-year period. I thought it'd be a story, like a novel, like a generational novel, but not a novel, because it's a story about two real people. Sometimes you read letters between, T.S. Eliot and somebody, or H.G. Wells and his girlfriend. But these are always years after the person died, and usually by a biographer who didn't even know them. What about a chronicler who was one of the partners? And my wife, I'm having her being interviewed by a third partner. And then she'll be able to take her. Now, there is a tape recorder at work. Somebody comes in and talks to her, and then she'll give her third person. But I'm writing in first person, as I have in the last book, A Writer's Life. So this book is for Knopf, and this is what I'm doing. Well, what makes a marriage last, or what kills a marriage? The key word, it isn't love, it isn't sex, it isn't romance. It's respect. You either have it or you don't. I mean, if you don't have respect for your partner, your spouse, nothing will save it. And that's essential. That's the most essential word, is respect. Now, I guess different people have a different interpretation of what that means. I can only tell you what it means to me, and without it, nothing else would mean anything to me. So, there are times when young people thinking of getting married or getting married, they think of it in terms of bliss or romance or being happy. Oh, they have to be happy. You don't have to be happy. You don't have to be happy. You have to have respect, but don't expect happiness to be an ongoing, God, if they don't reach the happiness equation, a high level of happiness, then they get out. They cut their losses. Goodbye. They move on. They say, oh, hey, moving on, an awful term, moving on. I don't think you should do that, and don't have to, as long as you respect the person. Now, in our relationship of this half century, it has had changes. Your life changes, your age changes you to a degree. Your expectations are something different when you're in your 70s, as I am in, and my wife is in, than we were in our 20s just starting out. The history of experience that you've had together, the building together, what you built, I don't mean such in a practical sense of only a house or the children you produced, though that's important. But I mean all the stuff that happened to the two of you and the roles you played during these, maybe they were crises or maybe they were perceived as crises and they really weren't in a long view back of things. But all the things that were part of your existence together, which you may interpret differently, but whatever it is that the interpretation might represent is still a shared experience. And with all these shared experiences and the maintenance of respect through the thick and thin, I think is a strong center and fiber that can keep entwined this thing called a lasting relationship. Parenthetically, I've always had a wife who worked, I think that's really important, had a career. It wasn't that she's stuck in some shopping mall with a job she hated. She's always been interested in reading from the time she was a schoolgirl. So she chose something that was connected to what she liked, which was reading, and became an editor. First a junior editor and then a senior editor. Now she has her own imprint, and she has fine writers from the novelists, and Ian McEwan or Margaret Atwood, or a historian like Antonia Fraser or Pat Conroy, a great storytelling novelist. She has a variety of people that she edits and has always had close relationships with her authors and with her colleagues in the profession of book publishing. She's had her own life. It hasn't been my life. It hasn't been, she's the wife of Gage Lees. Sometimes I think I'm the wife of the husband of Nancy Lees. But I've had my life too. And as a researching writer, as you've heard already in great length, I go on the road and I meet new people, and I have my own sense, my own world that I share with my wife and she shares. But we're not so intertwined that we can't breathe. There's not claustrophobia. So many relationships, they close in on one another. Now, some of this has to do maybe with circumstances. It might be economic. If you're unable to get any space and you're crowded, and then the arrival of children and the necessity of babysitters, you become old before your time, or you become less free. One thing about our relationship that's been a real advantage is we've always had, since we've always worked, both of us have worked, our combined income have allowed for live-in help when we had daughters. Oh, that was so important. Our first daughter was born in '64, and we were then married 3 years. Our second daughter was born in 67. We lived then in the same place we own now, though it's been altered because of the circumstances of our daughters leaving home and getting married. But they live in the New York area, both of them. But we've always had, Nana and I have always had space. That's really important. And we've always had someone living in there taking care of the children when the children were unable to take care of themselves before they were school age. And that meant that my wife and I could still go out if we wanted to. Not that we always did, but we had the option. There was always somebody, and we could always go out. And my wife has always had her sense of self, in addition to being a mother, being a wife, being an editor, being many other things. So I think that's pretty important. Now, it's not available to everyone, and other people make their adjustments in ways that sometimes you know that there's Meryl Streep and her husband, or they're superstars, they have spouses, and they do get along to a degree. Some of them don't, but some people who work in a hardware store don't get along either.